A woman never forgets a man who shows discipline, a man who doesn't just make promises, he executes. He follows through. He does the unsexy work without complaining. Why? Because discipline is proof of self-respect. And a man who respects himself knows how to respect her. She never forgets a man who brings emotional stability. Not perfection, not flawless composure, but responsibility. A man who owns his reactions, regulates himself, and refuses to weaponize his emotions. He doesn't walk away in anger. He doesn't punish with silence. He communicates like an adult because he understands that chaos kills connection and stability builds trust. She never forgets a man who has direction, a mission, a backbone, a vision bigger than the moment. Women don't want to babysit a grown man. They want to stand beside someone who knows where he's going. Not because she needs him, but because she can trust him. Purpose is attractive. Purpose is magnetic. She never forgets a man who protects not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. A man who makes her feel safe being herself. Safe being vulnerable. Safe being ambitious. Safe being imperfect. Protection isn't dominance, it's presence. It's loyalty, it's consistency. She never forgets a man who leads with integrity, not the convenient kind, the kind that holds even when it costs him. Integrity is rare, and women remember rare, and she never forgets a man who genuinely sees her, not just her beauty, not just the parts of her that benefit him. She remembers the man who listens, who values her mind, who supports her growth, who celebrates her wins without feeling threatened. Because that kind of man is uncommon, these 6 things, they aren't tricks, they aren't gimmicks, they are standards. They're the blueprint for becoming a man you're proud of, regardless of who's watching. A man who brings value by who he is, not by what he pretends to be. And when you become that man, believe me, she doesn't forget. Consistency and discipline are the foundation of a man's character, and they're the first things that leave a lasting impression. People underestimate how powerful it is to show up the same way, day after day, without needing applause or external motivation. But women notice it immediately. Consistency signals reliability, maturity, and strength. It shows that a man isn't governed by impulse or emotion, but by intention. And intention is what makes someone memorable. Discipline is not about being rigid or robotic. It's about having standards and living by them. A disciplined man doesn't crumble when things get uncomfortable. He doesn't quit because it's inconvenient. He doesn't shift his identity based on who he's around. Instead, he holds himself to a code even when nobody is watching. This matters because discipline bleeds into every part of life. How he works, how he treats people, how he handles stress, how he communicates, and how he handles commitment. A woman sees this and understands something important. If he can lead himself, he can be trusted in a relationship. What makes discipline unforgettable is that it separates a man from the majority. Most people operate on feelings. Disciplined men operate on commitments. Most people talk about what they'll do. Disciplined men build evidence through action. Over time, that evidence becomes trust. A woman doesn't remember a man because he had potential. She remembers him because he consistently showed proof. Proof that he meant what he said. Proof that he wasn't performative. Proof that he was dependable. Consistency also communicates emotional security. A man who is consistent with his words, his mood, his boundaries, his priorities, he creates an environment where a woman doesn't have to guess who she's dealing with on any given day. Predictability in character isn't boring, it's stabilizing. It creates space for openness, honesty, and vulnerability because she's not bracing for sudden changes, mood swings, or broken promises. What she sees is what she gets, and that reliability becomes something she can trust deeply, and trust is everything. It's the difference between temporary attraction and long-term impact. A woman never forgets the man who consistently showed up, even in small ways. The man who followed through on the things others dismissed as insignificant. The man who kept improving himself without seeking validation. The man who didn't need to be reminded of his responsibilities because he held himself accountable. Discipline also shapes how a man carries himself, his habits, his decisions, his lifestyle. A disciplined man has direction. He builds momentum, he grows, and that growth naturally commands respect, not because he demands it, but because he lives in a way that earns it. Women remember the men who move with purpose, who value their time, who stick to their commitments, and who don't let circumstances dictate their behavior. Ultimately, consistency and discipline create a gravitational pull. They form the kind of presence that lingers in a woman's mind long after the moment has passed. The man who embodies these traits becomes unforgettable because he represents something rare. A stable, dependable force in a world filled with inconsistency. Emotional stability is one of the most powerful traits a man can offer because it directly influences how safe and grounded a woman feels in his presence. When a man takes responsibility for his emotions instead of letting them dictate his behavior, he communicates strength, not the loud kind, not the aggressive kind, but the kind that's rooted in self-control and awareness. Women never forget a man who carries that level of internal discipline because it creates a sense of certainty that is incredibly rare. Emotional stability doesn't mean he never feels anger, stress, frustration, or self-doubt. It means he doesn't weaponize those emotions. He doesn't use them to manipulate, shame, or punish. He doesn't disappear when things get hard or explode when he doesn't get his way. Instead, he steps into discomfort with maturity. He communicates clearly instead of reacting impulsively. He seeks solutions instead of chaos. This kind of behavior shows that he's capable of navigating life's challenges without losing himself, and that's what makes him memorable. A woman pays close attention to how a man behaves under pressure. Anyone can be kind when things are easy, but stability is tested in conflict, in disappointment, in unexpected setbacks. The man who stays calm, thoughtful, and grounded when circumstances shift, that's the man she remembers. Not because he's perfect, but because he chooses composure over collapse. She sees that he doesn't let temporary emotions destroy long-term connection, and that tells her something about his character. Emotional stability also means accountability. A stable man doesn't blame the world for everything that goes wrong. He doesn't project his insecurities onto others. He doesn't make his partner responsible for his happiness or his reactions. He owns his mistakes without defensiveness. He apologizes without excuses. Accountability is attractive because it shows maturity, and maturity creates trust. A man who is emotionally stable makes communication feel safe. She can express concerns, needs, or fears without worrying that he'll shut down, lash out, or twist her words. She doesn't have to walk on eggshells, monitor her tone, or shrink herself to avoid triggering an emotional storm. With him, conversations become productive, not draining. Arguments become opportunities to understand each other, not battles to win. That emotional environment becomes unforgettable because very few men offer it consistently. Stability is also tied to confidence. Not performative confidence, but the kind that comes from knowing who he is and what he stands for. A stable man doesn't need to dominate or control to feel powerful. He doesn't need drama to feel alive. His confidence comes from inner alignment, not external validation. Women recognize that quickly, and it echoes in their memory long after he's gone. What makes emotional stability so impactful is that it elevates everything else about the relationship. It creates space for connection, growth, and vulnerability. It allows both people to relax into the dynamic instead of constantly managing tension. A woman never forgets the man who makes her feel emotionally safe. Not because he's soft, but because he's strong enough to stay steady in moments where others fall apart. Purpose and direction are two qualities that transform a man from ordinary to unforgettable. A woman doesn't remember the guy who drifts through life reacting to whatever shows up. She remembers the man who knows where he's going, why he's going there, and what he's building. Direction isn't about having every answer, it's about having clarity, intention, and the willingness to take consistent steps forward. That kind of man stands out because he's not waiting for life to happen, he's creating it. A man with purpose moves differently. His actions aren't random, his choices aren't accidental. He operates with a level of certainty that makes people feel anchored around him. When a woman observes this, it signals something important. He's not dependent on her to fill his void, entertain his boredom, or define his identity. He's already grounded in something bigger than himself. That sense of independence is powerful. It creates attraction not through need, but through strength. Purpose doesn't require grand gestures or dramatic speeches. It's evident in the small, consistent behaviors. A man who sets goals, works on himself, invests in his growth, and refuses to settle for mediocrity. It shows in the way he handles obstacles. Most people stop when things get hard, but a man with direction keeps moving. He adapts, he recalibrates, he tries again. That resilience becomes part of his presence, and it leaves a deep impression on anyone who witnesses it. When a man lacks direction, everything feels unstable. His mood swings with his circumstances. His confidence rises and falls with external outcomes. His energy becomes scattered and his decisions are inconsistent. A woman can feel that immediately. It creates uncertainty because she can't rely on someone who can't rely on himself. But a man with purpose, he brings stability simply by knowing his path. Even when he faces setbacks, he doesn't lose himself. He adjusts, but he doesn't collapse. Women are naturally drawn to men who are building something meaningful, not because they want to benefit from it, but because it signals leadership, vision, and depth. A man with direction isn't intimidated by ambition, his own or hers. He's not threatened by her success because he's too focused on his mission to compare or compete. Instead, he becomes a partner in growth, someone who elevates the people around him because he's committed to becoming better himself. Purpose also creates clarity in relationships. A man who knows what he wants in life tends to know what he wants in love. He communicates boundaries, intentions, and expectations without games or ambiguity. He doesn't waste time drifting in and out of someone's life because he's intentional about how he shows up. This kind of clarity builds trust. It makes a woman feel secure, not because he promises her the world, but because he proves he has the discipline and direction to build one. The truth is, direction is magnetic. Purpose makes a man stand out in a world full of distraction and indecision. It gives him a presence that people feel immediately focused, grounded, driven. And a woman doesn't forget that kind of man, because encountering someone who lives with intention is rare. He becomes a reference point, a standard, a reminder of what genuine ambition and clarity look like. Protection, in its truest form, is not about control or dominance. It's about presence, awareness, and the consistent effort to make someone feel safe in every dimension of their life. A woman never forgets the man who creates that kind of environment, not through force, but through emotional intelligence, loyalty, and reliability. Protection is one of the deepest forms of care, and its impact stays with her long after the relationship or moment has passed. A man who protects doesn't wait for a crisis to show who he is. His protective nature shows up in small behaviors, the way he listens when she talks, the way he supports her ambitions, the way he stands beside her instead of in front of her. He's not trying to overpower her strength, he's adding to it. He's aware of how his words and actions affect her, and chooses to operate with intention instead of impulse. When she's overwhelmed, he doesn't dismiss her feelings. When she's excited, he doesn't minimize her dreams. When she's vulnerable, he doesn't exploit it. That kind of protection goes far beyond physical safety. It builds emotional trust. Emotional protection means she can be herself without fear. She doesn't have to shrink her personality, tone down her ambition, or hide her flaws. She knows he won't mock her insecurities or turn her vulnerabilities against her during conflict. She doesn't fear sudden anger, mood swings, or emotional withdrawal. He communicates with clarity instead of confusion. He creates space for her struggles and treats them with respect. A woman remembers the man who gave her that kind of emotional shelter because it's rare and deeply comforting. Mental protection is just as important. A man who protects her mind encourages her to think bigger, not smaller. He doesn't belittle her ideas or make her question her intelligence. He challenges her in a way that elevates her, not in a way that breaks her down. He supports her goals, celebrates her efforts, and pushes her toward her potential because he genuinely wants to see her win. His presence becomes a source of peace, not pressure. She walks away from conversations with him feeling stronger, not drained. Even physical protection goes beyond the outdated idea of being the tough guy. Protection is about awareness and responsibility. It's walking beside her, making sure she gets to her car safely, stepping in when someone disrespects her, or simply paying attention to her surroundings when she's too tired or distracted to. It's not about being a savior. It's about being reliable. It's about making her feel like she's not navigating the world alone. What truly separates a protective man is consistency. Anyone can show up once. Anyone can act protective in a moment of adrenaline. But a man who protects with his actions, his words, his decisions, and his presence every day, even when it's inconvenient, that's the man she remembers. Protection is a form of love expressed through commitment, responsibility, and respect. The reason she never forgets a man like this is simple. He makes her feel safe in a world that often makes women feel unsafe. His presence doesn't weigh her down, it steadies her. He doesn't limit her, he empowers her, and once she experiences that level of security, it leaves a permanent imprint. Integrity and the ability to genuinely see a woman for who she is are qualities that leave a lasting imprint because they reflect depth, awareness, and emotional maturity. A man who operates from integrity doesn't shift his values to gain approval, and he doesn't compromise his character when the situation becomes inconvenient. His words match his actions, his promises align with his behavior. He does what's right even when no one is watching, and especially when it requires sacrifice. That kind of consistency forms a foundation of trust that becomes unforgettable, not because he demands recognition, but because he earns respect effortlessly. Integrity shows up in the smallest details. It's in how he speaks about others when they're not present. It's in how he handles opportunities that could benefit him at someone else's expense. It's in how he treats people who can't offer him anything. A woman watches these things closely, not because she's judging him, but because they reveal his core. If he cuts corners in life, he will eventually cut corners in relationships. But a man with integrity holds himself to a higher standard, and that sets him apart in a world where convenience often overrides principle. Equally powerful is a man's ability to truly see her, not just the curated parts she presents to the world, but the entire spectrum of who she is. Women, don't forget the man who pays attention. Not the surface-level kind, but the kind that notices her patterns, listens to her words, learns her values, understands her fears, and supports her dreams. When a man sees her mind, not just her beauty, he gives her something deeper than validation. He gives her recognition. She feels acknowledged, understood, and valued in ways that most people never take the time to offer. This goes beyond compliments or romantic gestures. It's about the way he listens without trying to fix everything, the way he remembers the details she didn't think anyone heard, the way he encourages her growth because he respects her ambition, not because it benefits him. He doesn't feel threatened by her strength. He doesn't diminish her achievements. Instead, he celebrates her wins, stands with her through losses, and treats her as a partner, not an accessory. A man who genuinely sees her is emotionally present. He notices shifts in her energy. He pays attention to what motivates her and what drains her. He understands her boundaries and respects them. He creates a dynamic where she doesn't have to fight for emotional space because he makes room for her naturally. That kind of connection leaves a mark because it's rare to find someone who sees the full picture of who you are and doesn't flinch. What makes this combination so powerful, integrity and truly seeing her, is that it builds trust effortlessly. She knows he's not pretending. She knows he's not manipulating. She knows his intentions are clean because his actions are consistent. And once a woman feels safe, understood, and respected on that level, it becomes nearly impossible for her to forget the man who made her feel that way. At the end of the day, what makes a man unforgettable isn't charm, looks, or theatric. It's the way he shows up. The discipline he holds himself to, the emotional stability he brings, the purpose he lives by, the protection he gives through presence, not force. The integrity he refuses to compromise, and the way he genuinely sees the woman in front of him, not as an accessory, but as a human being with depth, ambition, and a story of her own. These are the traits that don't fade with time. These are the things a woman remembers long after the moment has passed. Because a man who lives by these standards isn't just rare, he's impactful. And when a man like that enters her life, he doesn't just leave a memory, he leaves a mark. Thank you for reading. If you found value in this, subscribe for more.